Hello, I'm Ryan Sager, the Deputy Editor of WSJ Weekend Review. I'm here today with Chip Walter, who's the author of a new book called Last Ape Standing. It's about our many prehistoric cousins who did not make it with us into the modern age. Chip, there's been a lot of talk this week online about the idea of bringing a Neanderthal or a community of Neanderthals back to life. Where did that get started?
Well, that came out of a book, I guess, that George Church at Harvard wrote. He's a molecular biologist, and his work is about kind of rewriting DNA in all sorts of interesting ways. And he used that as a powerful example of what you can do whenever you're rewriting DNA.
So what do we know about the sort of day-to-day existence of Neanderthals?
Well, a lot more has come out. Since there was a French anthropologist back in almost exactly 100 years ago who was working with the bones of a Neanderthal that had severe arthritis. And so whenever he kind of rebuilt his bones and everything, he portrayed him as this stoop-shouldered, brute that, just by looking at him, you got the impression that he was stupid. And so that didn't help. And for decades, that's the way we looked at Neanderthals. The word Neanderthal kind of indicates that you're, stupid and brutish. But in fact, they were very, very bright. The brains were actually, on average, larger than ours. They had a lot of advanced skills. They were great hunters. They survived 2 ice ages in Europe, while Homo sapiens, our direct ancestors, kind of bided their time in Africa. But life was pretty rough. When you look at their fossils, their bones have been broken and healed, and some people have said they kind of look like bronco busters, because they've been injured so many times. But that also indicates that they took care of one another. It's not as though someone got hurt and they abandoned them. There's lots of evidence that they took care of one another, they watched out for one another, and they were very tight communities.
So what do we know about their ability to speak language?
Well, it's hard to understand what was going on in terms of language because there aren't any real hard fossils that can be left of language, or, there's just not, it's difficult to see. There is evidence that their throats were different than ours, which may have made it more difficult. And this, by the way, their throats were different partly because they were kind of selected for cold climates. And so because their throats were a little different and their larynx was a little different, they may not have been able to make all of the sounds that we could make. And so there's a lot of interesting theories about exactly how complex their language was. But generally now, anthropologists are coming around to the belief that they did have pretty sophisticated ways of communicating, but they may have been quite different from ours. I mean, it might have been kind of musical, and it might have been a combination of gestures and sound. So that in itself would have made it difficult to share ideas because they might not have had as rich a vocabulary and to share those ideas. The other thing is that if there weren't very many of them, it doesn't mean that you were running into different groups that may have had different new ideas, and then they could have cross-pollinated and shared those ideas. And then the other thing is that they didn't live very long. I mean, individually, they didn't live very long. So it was a rare Neanderthal to live past the ripe old age of 35. If you got to age 50, which some fossils indicate that they did, you were really ancient. And if you're dying early, then it also means that you don't have as much time to mentor, younger members of the group, and you don't have as much time to get experience and new ideas to pass along. So they were dealing with a lot of issues, and that might have ultimately been one of the problems that accelerated their extinction.
Sure, and one final question. So obviously we're in the realm of theory here, but what allowed humans to become the last ape while everyone else faded away?
Well, that's really the key premise of the book, and the answer to that is that we, more than any other primate, developed a long childhood. Beginning over 1 million years ago, there was a dilemma that our direct ancestors faced. Actually, all savanna apes that were in Africa faced. They were all walking upright. Some of them, their brains were growing larger rather rapidly. What happened was you have too large a brain, and and you're walking upright, which narrows the pelvis, it means that either you're not going to be born because your brain's too big and you can't get out if you go full term, or you get born early. And so what happened to us and our direct ancestors is we got born early. And so we really come into the world, even now, we come into the world as fetal apes, where our brain triples in size after we're born. With most other primates, most of the work and most of the development of their brain takes place before they're born. So as a result, we live out in the world and we kind of step away from our DNA and our genes, and our personal experience as children is kind of what lays the foundation for, the interesting people that we become later. And so we develop individual talents. Later, those turn into individual ideas. And then there were more and more Homo sapiens as we became more and more successful because of our larger brain and because of our ability to communicate and share our creativity. And ultimately, that's how you end up with civilization. And that's why there are no more Neanderthals left. There are no more Red Deer Cave people or Denisovans or all the other humans that were living on the planet 75,000 years ago. And there's 7.1 billion of us. And we're living in every nook and cranny of the planet.